Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to knit the herringbone stitch. There are a couple different variations of this stitch, but I'm going to show you this particular one. I'll do additional variations in future videos. You can see here I've knit up a couple samples. This one here is in a worsted weight yarn, so a little bit thicker yarn, and you can see it produces a fabric that lays pretty flat on both sides, and the edge tends to roll up a little bit. But in this sample here, I put a couple rows of just a plain knit stitch at the bottom, and you can see then it lays quite flat. And this one here I knit with a fingering weight yarn, so a little bit thinner and with a darker color, so you can see what it looks like in either shade. The stitch itself is just a 2-row repeat, and this is the right side, this is the back side. As you can see, it looks pretty nice on both sides. And I think because the pattern produces this nice dense fabric, it'll make for a great pattern to make something like placemats, or even just kitchen dishcloths or oven mitts, things like that. I think it works like a great pattern. It'll work great for those. I've also used the stitch recently to knit up this hanging dish towel. I was just trying to use up some leftover cotton yarn, and I did it in a 2-color. So I'll do the 2-color herringbone stitch in a different video. In this video, I'm going to show you just the 1-color herringbone stitch. So let me get this out of the way, and the pattern itself is provided in the video description. If you click on the little drop down arrow, you'll see the details there. Now the stitch itself, as I said, is a 2-row repeat, and it's knit on a multiple of 3 stitches plus 1. So I'm going to cast on 16 stitches for this demonstration, and I've already cast on 13, so I'm going to do 3 more. And I'm using the long tail cast on. You can do any cast on of your choice. And I'm just using double pointed needles because they're short and easier for this demo. You can, regular needles are just fine. Now the first row, you knit the first stitch. So just a regular knit. And then a yarn over. So you bring the yarn to the front. And then you're going to slip the next stitch purlwise, which means you're going to insert your needle as if to purl, but don't do anything, just bring the stitch over. Then you're going to knit the next 2 stitches. Now your yarn is in the front, which is where you want it to be. You're going to go ahead and knit 1 stitch, knit the 2nd stitch. And now that stitch that we slipped, which is the 3rd stitch down from the top on this right needle, that stitch that we slipped, we're now going to pass it over both these stitches. So you're going to take your left needle, you're going to insert it into that 3rd stitch from the top of the right needle, and you're going to pass it over both. So I usually use my right index finger to hold on to those 2 stitches, and I pass it over. All right? And that is the pattern repeat starting from the yarn over. That's the pattern repeat to the end of the row, essentially to the last it's a pattern repeat to the end of the row. So here we go. We'll see it a few more times. So you're going to bring the yarn to the front. So yarn over, slip 1 stitch purlwise, knit 1, knit 2, and then you're going to pass the slip stitch over. Again, be sure to pick up this 3rd stitch from the top and pass it over. And sometimes it works just fine. You don't even need to hold on to those. You just, if you're somebody who knits a little bit on the looser side, this will pose no problem. And if you are somebody who knits this on the tighter side, or it tends to knit. Now, if you are somebody who knits fairly tightly, you might want to knit just a little bit looser for this pattern, just to make it easier to pass that stitch over the 2 stitches. So here we go. We'll see that a few more times. Yarn over, slip 1, knit 1, knit 2, and pass that slip stitch over. Okay. Now by doing this yarn over, let me back up. By passing that slip stitch over the 2 stitches, we're decreasing this by 1 stitch. And then by doing this yarn over, we're making up for that stitch. So at the end of the row, your stitch count is going to remain the same. So here we go. Yarn over, slip 1, knit 2, and pass the slip stitch over. And one last time, yarn over, slip, knit, and pass the slip stitch over. Okay, And so your stitch count remains the same at the end of each row. And that was row 1. You're going to turn your work. Row 2, the pattern goes, you purl the first stitch, then you do a yarn over. Now, because we're in the purl row, the yarn over is going to be all the way around because your yarn was in the front, right? So your yarn over is going to be all the way around that right needle. Then you're going to slip one, again, purl wise. So insert as if to purl and just slip it over. And then you're going to purl 2 stitches. So just, now your yarn is already your yarn is in the front, which is where you want it to be. You're going to purl 1 and purl 2. And now you're going to do the same thing. You're going to pass that slip stitch over these 2 stitches. So again, take your left needle, insert it into the 3rd stitch from the top and pass it over those 2 stitches. And that's your pattern repeat. Yarn over, slip 1, purl 2, pass the slip stitch over. All right, so we'll see that a few more times. Yarn over. Just remember that in this row, you got to bring the yarn all the way around. Slip 1 and purl 1. Purl 2 and pass that slip stitch over. Now the one thing to watch for in this row is when you slip this one. When you go to purl the 2 stitches, one of those 2 stitches that you're purling is the yarn over from the previous row, and you can see that that stitch hangs a little loose and it's easy to drop that stitch. So if that happens, don't worry about it. Just take your needle and pick that stitch back up. Like so. Okay, so let me back up here. I did the yarn over, slip, purl 1, purl 2, and pass the slip stitch over. So once you get into a rhythm with this pattern, it's really quite simple because you're pretty much doing the same thing on either side, except in the first row you're doing it with a knit stitch, and in the second row you're doing it with a purl stitch. But the passing of the slip stitch over those 2 stitches is identical on either end. And that's it. Those are your 2 rows. And as you keep doing that, your pattern will start to look like this. And you can see it starts to create this wonderful herringbone stitch. And those last yarn overs that are last passing the slip stitch over that we do on either end actually creates this beautiful little edging on either side. And I think it looks really pretty. I think that's what helps lay the fabric flat as well. So I hope you give this stitch a try. As always, thanks so much for watching my channel. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments field for me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to my channel. Happy knitting!